Hello, friends, benders and non-benders alike. Welcome to Braving the Elements, Nickelodeon's podcast about all things Avatarverse. I'm Janet Varney.
And I'm Dante Bosco, and we're back in studio together,
We
Varney,
are
but
side
we're
by
not
side.
alone.
No, my friend, we are
No,
not
we're
alone.
not.
In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say, you could say that we are here with family because we are here with, and yes, it is something we are driving right into the ground, one of our two dads,
But he is one of our two dads.
co-creator of the entire Avatarverse, Brian Konietzko. Thank
Hello.
you so much for
Welcome.
doing this.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you in person.
In person.
Yeah,
what,
we haven't
what a
seen you in a
novelty.
minute.
Yeah.
Walked in, weren't in a box, had legs.
It's great.
Took
It's
a minute.
great.
We had to adjust to that, but we remember how this works, and we're so excited to be at our studio here in Hollywood to talk about all things Avatarverse.
I mean, that's right. We started podcasting with each other from home, audio only, but then we got
We
to do
did.
some shows together in front of live audiences, which we still do. Get to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, this is, if you're watching this out of chronological context, we started at home. We started doing some live shows together at cons. Now we're in a studio. It's just kind of a little bit of an evolution of the podcast. You can see that we started as one thing, but over time, the podcast has evolved to be something a little bit different. And that's why we thought it would be really fun to talk about a different kind of evolution
Yes.
here on Braving the Elements. God, I'm good.
You're one of the best.
Seamless, right? So that handily brings us to what we wanted to talk about because we thought it would be fun to take a look at the evolution of character design through Avatar: The Last Airbender from when the series was being incepted all the way up to book 3 and kind of the way it developed and why it developed the way that it did.
And of course, I'm going to add that it would be a dream to have you back as with the conversation once we have the feature animated feature
Yeah.
of Aang and his friends from Avatar Studios.
Because there's no way that there hasn't been more evolution happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, because it's going to
right
evolve
now.
even more.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right.
Hugely. And I think if that would be a fun conversation. And there are many artists working on that
Wow.
and taking the lead on that stuff. So hopefully we can get them in at that time.
That'd be great.
Talk about that.
We would love it. This is something that we that's the whole point of the podcast. Like, none of us ever get tired of hearing about that stuff or talking about that stuff and learning more. And that's one of the things, I've talked about this on the podcast a bunch. And Brian, I've sung your praises about this many times in the past, but going to Comic-Cons with you and Mike and Joaquim and sometimes Tim, Jeremy, the way that you bring the audience in and let them be a part of the process was very early on one of my favorite things about being a part of the Avatarverse at all. There's not this sort of removal of don't, ignore the man behind the curtain or what have you, that you really bring people in, and that in turn inspires people to do their own work when they see that it's possible and when they see kind of how those things evolve. So that's that we were excited to talk about that because I feel like that's kind of a signature of this world building that you've done, is that inclusiveness and encouragement in people to understand what the process is like. I love it.
Cool. Well, hopefully this discussion will offer some insight, especially for folks who are aspiring artists and or even already people who are working or want to get into character design.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can. I love talking about this stuff.
Thank God.
Yeah, it's something I spent a lot of time doing and thinking about over the course of the Avatar and Korra productions, and still occupies a lot of my time. Not as much, but a lot of my time now. So, I love it.
Well, Dante always talks about, the process of accepting praise from people who
Yeah.
tell us how good our performances were. And we're like, yes, but I think you might be also thinking
Yeah.
about the character design and the
100%.
animation happening. We can't take that much credit.
No, of course,
in
it's
the
a
end.
very unique thing to be a voice actor because you really do share the performance with the animators.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating as we're going back through, watching episodes for this podcast. Because like a lot of artists, I don't go back. You don't get to go back and really kind of delve into things you've done in the past. You're kind of on to what you're trying to do next. But going back to see these performances of me and Jack and Michaela, and what you see the artists and the characters together, it's so fascinating because I can see them ourselves in the character, but then I can also see this really wonderful performance being drawn by all these
Yeah.
artists.
Well, there's the performance, animated by the animators, but the kind of third component is the design.
Yeah.
And that's something that the animators typically are handed.
Okay.
The design is given to them. They're in the kind of like middle end of middle side of the production, and design is in the pre-production phase. Yeah, and I when I give lectures about character design to students, I often talk about how there's a difference between a beautiful drawing and a good design. And they're not. You can have a beautiful drawing of a good design, but you can have a good design that translates beyond different mediums. And so the way I think of a design is it's a recipe. It's a blueprint. It's a plan. And it's something that it's a set of plans that can be handed to different artists, again, different mediums. Again, all the, from a 2D colored, cleaned up drawing, or a plush, or a costume.
Yeah.
Right.
How does that design translate? The sort of ingredients, the components, the proportions,
Totally.
the sort of color blocking, the silhouette. How does that stuff translate beyond just like a gorgeous drawing? Because
Right.
someone like Ki-hyun Ryu, he can draw anything, and it's beautiful, and you're going to want to look at it.
Right.
But I can tell you, even trying to copy that very drawing, like if I try to copy it, I'm a lesser drafts person. It loses a lot of its magic, a lot of its charm. And then if someone copied my drawing of his drawing, and you go on, by the end, you might just be like, this is a terrible drawing. Why would anyone want to look at this? You've lost that kind of performance in a way, that sort of virtuosity. But a design can translate and can travel through different hands, different skill levels, and still communicate something strong. So that's kind of the
fascinating.
fundamental way to think of, at least the way I think of character design.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that sort of if you are a person who is not necessarily a visual artist, especially, and you think about something like a performance, like an actor,
Right.
there's this sort of almost pressure to be unique or to be this one-off that, it has to be so special that it couldn't possibly be duplicated, and that somehow the value is inherent in that, which is such a misrepresentation of the way art is produced. Depending on what medium you're using, it's not helpful at all to have this thing that's you can never duplicate. That's like, yeah, there's this one painting. It can live as one painting forever in one place. And even a print is sort of like, not the same. I mean, that's not.
Yeah, animation it's generally a collaborative medium. I mean, these days with, technology, I'll see an incredible post of some beautifully animated thing, and you read the caption, it's like solo animation project by some 19-year-old, and you're just like, oh my gosh. But generally, at least, when you're talking a series or a feature, it is a very collaborative process. And yeah, there's a sort of a practical consideration, like in 2D animation, especially where these things are hand drawn, even on the computer, they're still hand drawn. We have to keep the design kind of simple.
Right.
Any line you add, I always tell this to artists, any line you add to a design is going to be drawn thousands and thousands of times.
Wow.
Add a second line, you are now doubling
Yeah.
the number of lines.
Right.
So we are often in 2D animation paring it down, what is essential. And if you don't pare it down enough, you're really taxing your animators and your cleanup artists and your color,
Right.
your colorists.
Wow.
I know.
So, and that can actually make the animation suffer. It's not as on model, as we call it, like drawn,
Right.
like to the right look. But as artists, we're always so insecure, and we feel like we have to put little tchotchkes and doodads and
Yeah.
Exactly.
and fancy everything up. But so there's the practical consideration of what you're putting into a design, and the reasons why we might pare down. But actually, there's also I think there's a reason anime is gaining in popularity, and people still like 2D animation because there's a sort of an iconic. There's a stronger graphic impact of these flatter, kind of characters that aren't rendered with every little fiber in the clothing and every pore in the skin and every hair on their head. I think we as humans like these sort of it's art, like when an artist generally is making choices, and when you're making choices, you're leaving things in and you're leaving things out. And so even if budget and complex designs aren't an issue, you still kind of want to pare things down, because it's like, how quickly can the eye and the brain read these images and these characters, and kind of boiling it down to its essence, so maybe we don't need all those little bells and whistles. Maybe it's too much. It's getting in the way, so the practical concerns, and then I think there are sort of aesthetic concerns with simplifying designs and getting them down to their essence.
Yeah. Well, so going back to the sort of pre all of this, when you and Mike met at RISD and these very initial ideas were brewing, and if you have the art book, or if you've read the art book, or even if you've searched around for stuff like this online, it's certainly out there. There are these kind of cursory images that we can still look at and very much identify as characters we understand from the Avatarverse. This is pre-pilot, this is pre-pitch to Nickelodeon. How much of that were you already carrying around with you that you had learned in school and through your own experience? Like, how much of what you just said is experiential from all of this time of really understanding the process as a group, or how much of that was on your mind as you're kind of loosely sketching this little Aang character with an arrow on his head?
I was very lucky to go to RISD, and I went to the Art Academy of Cincinnati for my foundation year before that, and I majored in illustration, did a little bit of minoring in animation, but mostly focused on illustration. And I always say that is just a great, very broad, fundamental kind of art education. And it's just like, is this image communicating something to a viewer, an audience, or something? So I did not personally we didn't have character design at the time. I think maybe that RISD offers something like that now, but we didn't have any kind of animation focused classes, but I learned a lot of just fundamental kind of things. I'm mostly focused on painting and kind of almost more like storybook sequential art, but that all fed into my understanding of art direction and storyboarding and stuff like that. Character design, it's funny, it was the first job I had though. Coming out of school. So I sort of learned a lot of the fundamentals I'm talking about on the job. And this will sound weird. Maybe I didn't love drawing as much in school. I was much more into like painting.
Okay.
And I just wasn't someone who, I never, still don't really love sketching in sketchbooks. It sounds weird, but I just like sketching on loose paper. There's something about like committing it inside a book.
A book feels
really,
a little too solid.
Yeah,
I feel you.
Loose leaf, and that's how I did all the initial drawings of Avatar. They were all on loose leaf paper at work at Nickelodeon. So it's something that's, I still do this. I'm 47 now. I still do this.
Do not send him sketchbooks. Don't do it.
I have this stack of sketchbooks where I've started the first 5 to 10 pages, and then I find them whenever I'm moving, which is frequent. And I'm always like, and
empty.
Nothing.
I had high hopes for this one, and then it fizzles out.
That actually makes me feel so much better, because I am not that much of I'm not a great drawer, which we know.
I'm also not a great drawer.
We had Lauren Montgomery on the show.
Very great drawer.
Tried very hard and was such a great instructor in this sort of crash course into how to draw, for example, Aang. You did a great job. I can't say I did a great job. Mine looked like he had a 5 o'clock shadow because I kept trying to draw the circle over and over again. It's just it goes bad very fast, even a simple design. But we did get
I'm trying to pick up some tips today, because
you did a great job.
No, because there's a thing when you're signing autographs every now and then, because they're always like, "Can you sketch Zuko in my book?"
Yeah.
because I guess it's like communicating their art with my,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I get it, but I suck at drawing, and then I start to
Get in your head
draw,
about it. Yeah.
and then I'm going, what am I drawing? I'm
Yeah.
drawing nothing. I'm drawing, but something.
But again, I mean, bringing it back, I want to be clear. Like having drawing skills is certainly important.
Yeah.
When trying to be a professional character designer, but it's not everything. And again, there's having a design sense and talking about the kind of like understanding the recipe, understanding the ingredients. You can actually be a great designer who doesn't quite have the draftsperson's like highest level of skills. You typically then you would want someone who is good at that to interpret your
100%.
design.
Right.
But
Right.
something you said, Dante, going back to the sharing the performance thing, you see this a lot. A common exercise in animation school is to take a piece of found dialogue, usually from a famous movie, and to animate a new performance to it with
Oh, wow.
usually with
Oh, cool.
sometimes hand-drawn
Right.
2D animation, or I more often these days see students do this with a 3D character. And silhouettes are, I'm not like a scientist or a doctor, but I think the way we recognize things with our eyes, the first thing you see is a silhouette. It's sort of the graphic impact
Right.
of someone. I think Richard Williams, a great animator, in his book talks about you could not have your glasses on and your friend is down the street walking. He's talking about our movement,
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
and but you know it's your
You know
friend. You know it's your friend because you know the way they move. I think that extends also to just your silhouette. I just, before I see what you're wearing, or I just know it's you, and I know it's you. And so you want the silhouette of the characters to pop in that way. We typically, in TV animation, you're often seeing shoulder up shots of your
Sure.
characters.
Right.
So you want to make sure that their hair
Totally.
silhouette
Yeah.
or lack thereof is distinct.
All these
you know?
the gang has very distinct hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Each
Aang,
gang member.
if Aang obviously most of the time has a shaved head, but he has the most graphic of all.
Yeah.
He's got this arrow on his head. So Sokka, the little ponytail. Yeah, I think that's a consideration we often talk about, or we'll be like, oh, it looks cool. This character kind of has that hair. Oh, this character sort of has that armor,
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
And we might just try to break it up.
Am I mistaken, or aren't the opening credits of the show kind of all about silhouettes?
Yeah, that was like a reference to the kind of Shaw Brothers
Totally.
classic thing. But yeah, it's so within the world of Avatar, we obviously have these different elemental cultures. So there's also the like, okay, there's this character, but then now I want to know that they're associated with fire. I want to know
Right.
they're associated with air. So again, without having like, oh, we can do really complex patterns
Right.
and all these things, stuff that we just can't do in 2D, or it gets distracting if we try. Then it's like, all right, well, we're going to use these palettes. We're going to reserve these colors for this culture, and then also just shapes. Oh, okay, fire stuff's going to be kind of pointy and curl upward, mimicking fire.
Right.
Earth, we're going to keep stuff more square and broader. And focus more on greens and earth tones and water, obviously. So you just start to set up these sort of motifs that you can, again, if you're, once you get into the world, you don't have to know the show, but when you're in the first episode, Sokka and Katara are from the same
Right.
culture, and when
Yeah.
Aang pops up, he's not only not from that culture, he's not from that region. He's not dressed for it,
Right.
Yeah.
and his colors really stand out, and so that's all part of the storytelling as well.
Totally.
Well, and two, the like you put it in a way that feels both simple and complex, because in my mind too, you're thinking about the color, you're thinking about the shape, but you're also bringing in those influences from, First Peoples, First Nations, and the Chinese culture, and, finding ways to incorporate the kind of natural geometry of the element that you're talking about, but also seeing how some of that pre-existing stuff ends up folding so nicely into like some of the armor and stuff. I feel like fits the description of, yes, this is kind of
Fire.
Yeah, it sort of mimics fire, but was that what like Chinese warriors were thinking when they designed that necessarily, or was that just one of those things where you really start to see the collective conscious even across like centuries of, wow, this actually really works when you put these things together?
Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with humans, in like martial arts or yoga or dance, at the end of the day, there are only so many like kind of geometries that our bodies tend to make and not tip over, like
right.
Sort of strong shapes. And then like with armor, there's across all cultures, all eras, there's certain commonalities of like, well, the arm needs to move around if I'm going to be able to use a weapon and travel and not just be in a ceremonial suit of armor and so there are just these kind of commonalities across cultures, and then again, like we have to boil things down for 2D animation and make it something that can be replicated, drawn.
So
I mean,
fascinating.
Zuko's costume is actually like his armor it's for 2D. It's especially at that time, like it had too many lines. It's not
too
not super
complicated.
simple. There's a lot of trim because we wanted the armor to be dark, but then you add this
Yeah.
red trim to make it pop.
So I cosplayed him and made that armor out of foam, and it was hard.
Yeah,
Too many lines. I'm agree with you. Too many lines
And
of the thing.
I think probably if it had been made out of foam in real life, not
But
effective as
not
armor.
that effective.
Not effective as armor.
And then we especially with Avatar, we were certainly drawing inspiration from real world cultures, but we always had to kind of simplify it. And then certain things we were like Zuko's armor, the Fire Nation armor, in the end, I mean, initially we were pulling from specific cultures. In the end, we just wanted to kind of have a vibe of fire.
Yeah.
And it's vaguely reminiscent of existing things, but it wasn't, it wasn't super specific to something.
Yeah.
Some outfits, some costumes, some sets of armor were much more directly pulled from real life inspiration. Others weren't. We're a little more inspired by, and then just kind of
I love the scope you're talking about, because I think as actors, we're really slaves to the moment. Our job is to kind of find human in this one moment. We're so involved in the moment, and then talking as a designer how you're really seeing the scope of the world, which we're not always involving which is not our job. Like, I'm not worried about all this other stuff. I'm worried about like why I'm sorry for this moment that happened. And so it's great to see the scope of like a different idea. Like, oh yeah, you're thinking about all the other stuff that influences what we're doing, obviously. But it's wonderful to kind of see that recipe of how that's working.
Yeah, I was the art director on the first series, and on Korra, I shared those duties on Korra with Ryu and Joaquin for the first season, and then I kind of took over as they, we just sort of divided and conquered. And yeah, I mean, as an art director, as co-creator and EP of the show with Mike, like I am always thinking, and we are always thinking about like the overall impact of this.
Yeah.
So to talk about the evolution of Avatar specifically, like I was not really focused on character design in school. I was much more into environments. I was into landscape painting, urban kind of nocturnal painting and stuff. And it wasn't until I got into my first job as a character designer on Family Guy, where it was a very limited style. We didn't have a lot of lines to play with. And one of the first things I did, I think I did this was to get the job. This was my test to get the job. They were having trouble getting a likeness of Christy McNichol, the 70s actor. And in
the Family Guy
in
style.
the Family Guy style, where
Yeah,
the eyes are perfect circles and with dots. It's hard to get people's
Very
like,
limited lines.
Yeah.
Very
It's-
limited
it's
lines.
limited, and I did it, and at least
That's
to the
amazing.
standards of the art director, and but so working on that show, I worked on it for 6 months. I did 6 episodes. I think I did 100 characters per episode.
Wow.
Whoa. Oh.
So that's like a crash course.
No kidding.
In,
That's crazy.
in learning about the economy of line and what you're communicating and how to get a likeness of someone in a very limited style. And again, I think it's not just like, oh, these are the limitations. I mean, I think these limitations are good. Limited palettes often produce better work. You know, in music, hey, we're only going to use these instruments.
Totally.
In paint, we're only, painting, we're only going to use these colors. Photography, we're only going to do black and white. What can you say with just value, So those kinds of limitations actually can make work stronger. It makes it more potent.
Right.
You're not, every little line and doodad that you're adding, it's adding more information the brain has to process. So
Right.
blah, 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 blah. Anyways, so that Family Guy crash course and then working on Mission Hill and King of the Hill and then Invader Zim, which had a
Hey.
really, really fun design style. And, I learned a ton over those first 4 years of my career, and did a little bit of character design, and then was the art director on Zim. So I was for the second season. So I had like working with designers and generating some on my own, like just and seeing it come back in animation, seeing what
Right.
works, what doesn't, that's part of it too. So when I got to Avatar, on Zim, I was getting back into anime, and so I was really inspired by what I was seeing with like Furikuri and Cowboy Bebop.
Okay.
So when we started Avatar, the initial idea was not, let's do an anime style, anime inspired show. That came very soon after, but it wasn't the like inception of the idea. It was just responding to a prompt from Eric Coleman for what Nickelodeon was looking for at that time. Once we realized, martial arts, we were like, well, let's make, we wanted it to sort of be inspired by Asian cinema and traditional Asian martial arts. And then we were like, why don't we make it an anime show? And here was our idea. This was our reasoning.
Okay.
I was particularly inspired by that stuff at that time, but we thought, let's pick a style that's established. That way it'll be easier for people to draw. Because I was working on Zim, which was really, really cool design, but people had such a hard time drawing that style because
Right.
it was idiosyncratic. It was out of
Yeah.
nowhere. It was just
Right.
Jonan's style.
Yeah.
And no one knew how to draw it.
Right. Like
The crew had a hard time with it. I am a kind of an adaptable artist. That's if I have a skill, it's that I can adapt. I don't really have like a strong like this is my style.
my style. Yeah.
But that can be very good in animation because you get these jobs that are 6 months to 2 years.
Swiss
and
Army knife.
You've got to switch
Sure.
to a different style. American, Western shows typically very often it's just some totally like idiosyncratic style that just
Yeah.
came out of nowhere. It's just someone's thing. Whereas there's this ongoing tradition. Now to say anime, I mean there's a
vast. It's vast.
huge spectrum of styles, but you can kind of pick a neighborhood and hang
Right.
out in it.
Right.
So that was our thought. This has not panned out. I can tell you 20 years later, it's a more complicated style for people because it often involves, you need to know anatomy really
Yeah.
well. It's not cartoony. It's actually
No.
just streamlined, realistic anatomy.
Right.
And a lot of people go into animation because they're like, I don't want to deal with that
Yeah.
stuff. Like, I'm not trying to be
Give me a
Yeah.
couple
figure
circles.
painter.
I'm gonna do a
stuff for me.
Simpsons or a Flintstone guy.
Yeah.
where are
Just
the
gonna do some stuff.
beans and
Exactly.
the tubes and yeah.
Exactly.
And then the other thing was, especially in 2002, things are different now, but in 2002, here in Southern California, anime was gaining in popularity, but it was still pretty niche. And
Super niche.
people, especially in animation, might be into it, but finding people who were proficient in drawing that style was next to impossible here. And then we ran into all this stuff. Oh, well, we'll work with the studios who do this animation, and at that time, the Japanese studios were not interested in working with, and we could do a 12 series
They were like,
podcast
no,
about that.
we're good.
I have a lot of things to discuss about that. But we won't get into that now.
See you then. See you for
So,
that
you know,
special.
the more traditional route is for US studios is working with Korean animation studios. And there are many Korean studios that work with the Japanese studios. So we're like, oh, we'll work with them because they work with the Japanese artists doing these styles. And they are like, yeah, but those artists, we have them to work on the Japanese stuff. We're not giving you those artists.
Got it.
So we ran into that a
Ay,
lot.
ay, ay.
Oh,
And,
my
and then
goodness.
it's, you know, it's a more difficult style for a lot of people, even if they are familiar with it. It's just, it again, there's a level of sophistication because the clothing is actually
Yeah.
quite naturalistic, the way it folds, the way it
Mhm.
flows. Hair is
everything.
complicated.
Hair is
It's
everything.
not just style. So then you start to see why maybe characters have spiky hair and you know, blah blah blah. So that was how we ended up there. Here's the other thing. I was not proficient in the style either. But again, I can adapt. I'm pretty adaptable.
Totally.
But I was really, I've said this before, I was really aware of not wanting to just copy.
Mm.
Like, sure, I loved Furikuri and I had the whatever books I could get on it at the time. But I was like, if we just copy that, like, we're just counterfeits.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just even if it would look better, it would look cooler, slicker, more stylish, more legit. I was like, that's just not authentic. That didn't seem to be coming from the heart and
Right.
and we wanted to very clearly be inspired by anime, but I was really conscious about not just lifting some pre-existing style. So that sort of contradicts what I was saying. I was like, we wanted to stay in that neighborhood, but I thought I'm going to do my spin on it.
Totally.
Sure.
And and there are things I can tell you, looking back, there are choices I made that I'm just like could have copied a little more. You know, like could have made this a little better. And then there's one
Design wise or story wise?
yeah, style wise.
Style-wise.
Like overall. But the number one thing that I regret on Avatar The Last Airbender, we changed this on Korra, but is the size of their heads compared to the rest of their bodies.
Bigger or smaller? What are we talking about?
I wanted to go. I'm not trying to throw Mike under the bus. This was just the discussion back
Here
then.
we go.
No. Mike was used to bigger head because
Yeah.
he had been out here working in animation
Right.
in the U.S. in Southern California longer than I had because he was 2 years ahead of me. I think he was used to bigger headed characters.
Okay.
And if you look, like I was doing all these analyses of like Furikuri and stuff, and like you look at like Cowboy Bebop, they are many heads tall. Like they are
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
like Spike is like a lanky,
Yeah, very lanky.
his head is tiny compared to his body, and that was not common in most American animation
Right.
at the time. And when I did a breakdown of like the Furikuri proportions, like Naota, I don't know, I think he's like 14. So he wasn't too much older than Aang.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like a version of my style, but in that height. And Mike's like, it's just he looks too old, you know? And so I'm not putting it all on Mike, but we were sort of like, okay, we're going to make the heads bigger.
Bigger heads.
And I want to be clear, there was a version with the bigger head that would have looked better that I wouldn't regret.
Right.
I just didn't know how to kind of dial it all in and get it to look good. So when I watch the old show or I look at the old model sheets, I mean, I am just cringing.
It's big heads.
You always talk about
It is
that.
so
It's
hard.
so
When did the heads start getting smaller?
I mean, the thing is, JM Animation, they tended to shift the proportions
Okay.
more towards anime. And because each studio we worked with 3 studios on the show, and each studio had their own sort of ways of interpreting the model sheets.
Yeah.
And the JM versions were definitely better.
So they
funny.
sort of made the adaptation in a sense without you even
Yeah,
knowing or planning that.
Yeah, so there are examples in the show that look good. If you flip to the model sheet, like Shinfu, I just saw Shinfu's model sheet the other day. I mean, it looks like someone scaled his lower body down like 40%.
Like a little
He's got these
bobblehead, kind
long,
of.
It's
but he has
funny.
these long
long.
arms.
I've never thought about head size, and I'm thinking about other characters I have played. Think about some other characters you played
Yeah.
in American animation. They got big heads.
Yeah.
Well,
They're
and
all
look at,
big-headed.
like Chibi and like, you know,
Yeah.
so much merchandise. Like we continue to blow their heads up.
We just like the bigger heads.
Bigger,
Americans
bigger.
like big heads.
But let me be so this goes further than that. So I regret it, and I do think there was a better version of it than I did. That's why I want to be really
Right,
clear.
right.
I'm not trying to throw Mike under the bus.
No throwing
No,
Mike DiMartino
never.
under the bus.
I was the
Never.
art director. Ultimately, it was up to me to make it look good. And I was the primary character designer in the early developmental stages.
It's
But
Brian's fault, you guys. I'm gonna say that in the camera right now.
but despite my reservations, my regrets, and how I look at it, I was this is kind of why I made the choice. I was aware that there were slicker, more stylish anime looking shows out there at the time, and I was like, I don't want this to be too slick. I
Right.
don't want it to look too flashy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's why I didn't mind sort of injecting my kind of like awkward, less fashionable version into it.
Yeah.
And I actually think that the awkwardness and the less slick look has added to its charm.
Mm.
And I think it makes it a little more approachable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Whereas some shows that are, some anime shows that are gorgeous, it's so slick that I
Right.
think it's almost like high fashion. It keeps people
Yeah.
out
I
a
see
little
that.
bit.
Yeah.
I
Totally.
definitely see that.
Totally.
So
But there are moments. That being said, there are moments in Avatar where we get to some real anime,
we
like
were trying.
high level
Yeah.
stuff. We're like, oh, they're going for it. Oh, they
We
went
were
for
trying.
it.
Yeah.
And then in Korra, we very deliberately, day one, I was like, their heads are going to be smaller.
Small heads.
They're going to be taller. And we did that. And
Taller, smaller head.
But
Yeah.
here's where we come back to the like character design being part of the tone and the storytelling. It changed the tone. And we were aware we were actually going for a bit older
Right.
of a show and a little more adult, a little darker. In some cases, a lot darker.
Uh-huh.
And it's less goofy. It's
Yeah.
less.
100%.
It's less approachable. It is a little sleeker and sexier, and it's just like, okay, so it's an interesting balance. And I would I just go back and give like Korra proportions on Avatar? No, but I would. There's things I would do differently. But at the end of the day, it's like, we've been editing it
right. For
the
decades.
symphonic concert, and especially book one. It's
Oh, you're saying
it's
okay,
really hard for me to watch.
the big heads.
What are you
And
saying?
it's like the awkward,
No, but you're critical of like the
But it makes it
martial arts
fun. I
animation.
think some parts
and
are fun.
stuff,
all of it,
and-
all of
God.
it. But at the same time, I have to recognize like it still connects
Oh, it's
Of course.
with a lot of
special.
people, and
It's
so
special.
those are important things to keep in mind. I think as artists and designers is like, sleeker and fancier and more stylish. It actually isn't always
Doesn't
the
always
answer.
win.
Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of kind of goofy,
I also gonna point
awkward,
out.
awkward charm in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Mike's not here, and myself being a bigger headed person, skull wise.
He does have a bigger
I
head
think
than I
me
do.
and
There's no
Mike have
question
bigger
about it.
heads than you have a smaller head,
It's medium.
medium. So I just want to point that I don't know if that has anything to do with design. I'm just putting it out there.
Interesting. Like would
I'm
it
putting
occur-
myself
you
in
would
the bigger
naturally
head.
Give yourself a bigger head.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
animation
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Well, I may just have a bigger head. when
I
draw.
was just, Mike is so sick of hearing me whine about this. But it's been interesting for me because actually there are some shows, I'm trying to think, even some more recent productions out of Japan that I've really enjoyed. And I'm like, they actually kind of have quite big heads. But it's like they did a
like
better
this is dinner conversation between you and Mike.
they did a better job of like the neck length and the
Mm,
shoulder
mm.
width than I did. And I'm just, these are the things that keep me awake at night.
Well, one of the things that is I keep coming back to doing this podcast, which is kind of strange to me, is I feel like my brain is sort of bisected in that on one hand, what I love about it is breaking all of this down and talking about it and really being that fan who's on the inside of it and understanding how it all came to be and choices that were made and recognizing, yes, a choice was made here. Brian now maybe thinks it could have been a different choice, along with the person in me who, even as I am watching the episode multiple times to prepare our outline for our show, on some level, the Avatar has always existed the Avatar verse has always existed. It was just there, like the marble that got
Yeah.
carved
Yeah, yeah.
underneath was the design all the time.
Right.
And I think that is a tribute to what does work about it, is that
Yeah.
in some ways I can pick away at this all I want and feel like I'm getting more and more to the bottom of how it all came to be. And on some level, there was a part of my brain that refuses to accept any of it and is like, no, it was all just there. And you guys found it. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
those things exist.
It's like you tapped into
together
some timeless
for me.
tale that
Yeah,
we just
well, I
uncovered.
I appreciate that. I think that again is it's everything we've talked about earlier, where you're making it feel like it's, oh, these people look this way because they're a part of this culture. Their clothing looks this way. They style their hair. Oh, that's different from these people. And I think we as humans like to organize things and categorize things. And when you give these very clear kind of visual, these sort of visual attributes that then pair with like, oh, it's Earth. It's a culture inspired by Earth, and Earth is strong and stubborn, and
Right.
oh, it's fire, and that it's very dynamic, and they're a dynamic, motivated people, and and this isn't based on any real world culture. We
Right.
were just like
Right.
let's use the element as the sort of foundation
Totally.
for these different cultures. And then so not to toot my own horn, but to bring this full circle, like the goofiness, the kind of rough edges around especially the earlier animation. Actually, it's also a testament to the design and not the style or the drawing.
Right.
Because sometimes, in some cases, the design looked pretty cool, and then the animation interpretation fell short. And it just happens. Production's hard, and sometimes the episode's challenging, or you don't get maybe the top tier artist that's like freelanced out. But anyways, everything I was talking about, the strength of the recipe, the design,
Yeah.
I think that still shines through. And,
Yes.
And I often, when I'm talking to designers now on like the multiple projects we're working on, like I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse, but sometimes I'll say with a design, like, can you see someone cosplaying this? Like, I'm not
That's
trying
great.
to design things just so people can cosplay.
Right.
But I'm
No.
like, if you walked into a convention floor and someone was wearing this costume, would you know what
Right.
character it was?
Right.
Because now you've gone from a fantasy interpretation of a human that's
Yeah.
impossible
Right.
to a flesh and blood human who's probably different proportions and
Totally.
and now you've taken this graphic interpretation
Right.
of clothing and hair and armor and whatever, and you've put it on a person. Is that recipe strong enough that or would you just go, I don't know what that is?
No.
Are they in a costume?
And you
is
think
that
about
from a
that-
show or some game I don't know about?
The recipes that are good at the amount of Comic Cons I go to, I could see the character not even dressed the way the character's supposed to be. They can just wear certain things, gender bent, another in
Right.
another reality,
They do,
anything, and you're like,
do
Yeah.
a mech version.
a mech version. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, the recipe's so
Yeah.
strong. They're taking the recipe and they're putting it in all different kinds of worlds. And you're like,
Yeah.
I get it,
Yeah.
like
And then
instantly.
sometimes there's stuff that seems, dare I say, and I think this is risky because to your point, you can't task yourself with creating something that's never been seen before because that you'll never do anything because that's
Right.
not the world we live in. But then you also see stuff that it starts to approach derivative to the point where like I have mistaken characters for characters from other things.
Very true.
And people are like, yeah, people say that this character does look a little bit like blah, blah, blah from 5 years before that. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
we're all inspired. Some things are just you grow up on it and you don't know that it has
Totally.
sort of formed
Yeah.
your aesthetic or your kind of like reference points for things. And then there are like you just didn't remember that you saw that thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then there are like a
I
little
know
bit
I
I am
saw
paying
it.
homage to that
Uh-huh.
thing. There's
there's a scale. There's
Yeah.
a real scale there.
But I again, like I'm very, whereas I can be as self-deprecating as like I can go on and on about everything that I would do differently.
You
and
think?
things that but I actually am quite proud of the designs
Yeah.
Right.
and how well they translate across, to costumes, to plush, to
Right.
chibi, to cookies, like whatever it is. Like,
You've also played with so much design as we're looking back and going through the books, and you're seeing the Book of Water and then the Book of Earth. Now we're in the Book of Fire, and you get to see all these characters from different places wearing different, because they go,
Yeah.
now we're all in Boston Same, now we're wearing
Absolutely.
Earth stuff, and then now they're all in the Fire Nation. You get to
Yeah.
see everybody, and it's kind of crazy how you're playing with the design within the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is crazy.
that was super fun. So, Toph, like, oh, we want to keep the bun, but like the
Mhm.
hair, her headband, oh, now that's going to be
Yeah, it
pointy.
changes
and,
everything
And
a little
Katara, oh, like still like referencing the silhouettes that they're known for, but like a different spin. Yeah, as a designer, that stuff is always super fun because it's fun to like refresh the look and
But
It
you
was
all
great.
you share that. You actually share that transition with the audience in the headband, right? I mean, you actually where we actually see like, oh, this is like this is like this. Like you see the sort of stripping away of like, well, I can't wear this here, but and so people get to be a part of that transition in a way that feels like, yes, it makes sense for the purposes of understanding, like getting used to them wearing their Fire Nation clothes. Yes, it makes sense so that they stay recognizable from just a very practical standpoint. But it also, to me, feels like, again, you're on the inside of it. There's a sense of the show itself kind of winking at the audience and saying like, hey, we're going to show you like how these things are still going to work within the design of the character that you've come to understand and that you've come all the way here with, which is great. I love it.
To your testament, your designs and storytelling designs and plot designs had influenced everything. A lot of stuff afterwards where there's so many things that
Sure
we
seems
both
like
auditioned
it.
for. We're like, oh, and they were very clear about we're doing an Avatar-esque
Right.
whatever you want to say the show is in space or
Right.
with these particular characters. Like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have permeated, culture in that way, I can
cool.
only be flattered. I mean,
1,000%.
that's cool because obviously, it's not like Mike and I and everyone we worked with. We're all nerds and fans and just we love storytelling and artwork and I'm still inspired by tons of. I'm inspired by artists half my age,
Right.
and not inspired by AI. And
Yeah.
not
What about if you want to get real creeped out real quick?
not
That's my
excited or
experience.
encouraged by what that's doing and the prospect for art students right now and
Yeah.
and young artists as execs and these tech companies are looking to just phase out this beautiful craft and skill and art form. So that not excited, but
Yeah.
if a living, breathing artist was
Yes.
inspired by anything that my friends and I and colleagues did,
Yeah.
I'm flattered. And
Yeah.
and that's cool.
I run into them every day. And
Oh,
then,
for sure. For sure. And we talk to them on the show. I mean, we have people who are incorporating whether it's the design into fashion or the way they teach martial arts to students or teach stuff in their classroom using the values that they grew up with on Avatar. All of that stuff is permeating. The permeation is
deep.
deep.
It's wide. It's
deep and
more
wide.
than I can fathom. Like everything she just said.
Absolutely. And we love that, some of the design stuff, like if you're in from the jump or if you're just getting to know the show, like there are ways for you to find out the history behind some of this is just one example and then we'll wrap up. But, I love too that you come back to things that didn't make it in the first round. So in my mind, I'm always wondering like, I wonder if there's going to be something in the movie that never made it to the first series or never made it through Korra because we know that we have Naga from a very early sketch way back in the day.
Sketch. Yeah.
And it took a handful of years and a whole different series, but you found
He
a
made
way
it.
to
He made it.
incorporate.
He made it in. Sorry.
I
haven't got there yet. We haven't got there.
He hasn't gotten there.
I can't wait.
Yeah, but that to me again shows the idea of like you're not just like embracing something and then kind of crumpling that up and throwing it away because it's time for something different, and those things all live in a continuum.
That comes down to one of the number one pieces of advice I give to artists and writers as well. Save everything. Save every doodle, every story idea.
all those loose leaf papers.
Yeah.
Don't judge it's if you judge these things in the moment or even the next
Mm.
day, I think you're too close to it and you are, oh, this doesn't look as good as this show I was just watching or this artist I
Yeah.
just saw on Instagram. Don't don't
Yeah.
even give yourself that chance. Just save it. And because often you'll come back to an idea, you will forget maybe entirely making it. So you are no longer that close to it and
Right.
judging it. And you'll see it, at least initially, you'll see it fresh. And that is how Avatar happened.
Yes.
Because
Wow.
that first drawing, I barely remembered doing it. I started getting into a habit when I was getting really burnt out on Zim, just pulling crazy long days and working weekends. I was like, you know what? I need to start drawing for myself. And again, I told you in college, I didn't really draw that
Right.
much. I liked to paint. I liked to do photography. I wasn't doing a ton. I would draw with ink, like pen and ink or brush and ink, but I wasn't doing like a lot of like animation style drawing. So I just started like actually kind of finding my own style for the
Mhm.
first time. And I would just say, hey, even though it's late, give myself 30 minutes to an hour to just stay and draw for myself. And I would just keep a stack up on the shelf. I would just finish the drawing. I was bleary-eyed. I needed to get home safely. I would just put it on the stack and go. And so I wasn't
Mm.
even really looking at these
Wow.
drawings. And then when Mike and I were
That's
like,
great.
hey, let's develop a show together. Let's pitch it. And Eric, we were working on something, but Eric, before even seeing it, was like, oh, that's not, we're not looking for that type of thing right
Right.
now. I didn't even pitch it. He's like, we're looking for A, B, and C. I just grabbed that stack of paper, came over to Mike's, and
love that.
we literally put everything out on his kitchen table. Just what do we have? And there was stuff that was super cute and like animal
Yeah,
characters.
yeah.
There was
Right.
stuff that was, it kind of ran the gamut. And there was that drawing that I'm just like, what is this? I had come home and found it.
Right.
Oh yeah, I kind of remember doing this. And then did
Wild.
the version of it where Aang was younger. But again, that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for folks is like, you'll find, I just found some stuff unpacking some
See?
boxes from 4 years ago where I was like, I don't even remember writing this, but it's my handwriting.
I love that.
Yeah.
Save everything, even
Right.
if it doesn't have to be illustration. Save your writing. Save those tiny little ideas. Because I agree with you. If you don't get it out there, it can't ever evolve into something
Right.
or stay the same. But to your point, we don't even when you think you're being objective and you're like,
Yeah.
I know I'm not too close to this. I just know it stinks. It's like you aren't seeing it clearly at all.
Or it might give you a different idea later.
Absolutely. Or it might
Totally,
inspire a
totally.
partner that you're working with. Might go, oh, I see that one sentence. That's a really funny, weird concept. Whatever
Yeah.
you intended, now I have this idea.
Yeah.
And
If you
grows
made
into
it,
something
there was a
beautiful.
reason why you made it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
If you made something,
save it.
there's
These-
a-
Save it.
These are the things that as humans and not AI algorithms, that differentiate us
Yes.
and that make us unique as creators and storytellers.
Right.
And we're all reflecting our life experience back as storytellers
Yes.
and
Right.
performers and artists. Like we are reflecting back a set of values
Totally.
and so reflecting your own perspective, flawed and limited though it may be, is legitimate. And so yeah, keep all your scraps.
Keep your scraps.
Yeah.
I love it. Brian, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
As
Thank you so
always.
much.
Always fun.
Thank you
Amazing
for doing
conversation.
this. Yeah.
It's great talking to you. We're so excited for all the things that's
I know.
happening. Like
Ugh.
me, like everyone listening is gonna see how
I-
big the heads
I-
are.
Oh my God.
How
I
big
have
the
to
heads
say-
are,
I'm
the new
saving
things coming out.
Scraps of questions for things I haven't even seen yet that are in the Avatar verse. I'm like, talk about saving your scraps. I'm
I'm
like,
just-
remember to ask about when the movie finally comes out.
Well, I can't obviously give any specifics, but I can just say the thing that I have personally been working on the past several months
Yes.
has been very heavily involved in character design, and it's a new direction for the Avatar verse. And I didn't originate it. There was an artist I was a fan of, and we contacted, and the first drawings that he puts out, I was like, that's it. And,
Wow.
I got chills.
and the heads are quite large, but
Quite large
You heard it
heads.
here.
large by
Respect those large heads.
large by Avatar standards.
Large by
So,
Avatar standards,
yeah.
okay.
I'm
Can't
so
wait.
excited about this style. It's not my style, but it is one that I just cannot wait to
Oh my God.
inhabit.
Okay.
excited.
Well, there's going to be so much
yeah.
to talk about when it's all out in the world and we
Yeah.
can do that. Until then, Brian, yes, one of our two dads. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for doing
much.
Braving the
Such a
Elements.
pleasure.
Save your scraps, everybody.
Did you know you can hear bonus episodes of our award-winning podcasts?
Subscribe to Avatar Braving the Elements Premium on Apple Podcasts for early access, exclusive content, and ad-free episodes.
I'm so excited!